On the humid nights of St. Louis, Missouri, a Victorian mansion of dark brick seems to swallow the light from the street lamps. 33 rooms, spread across 4 floors, hold secrets that no amount of money could ever erase. This is the story of the Lemp Mansion, where an American dream transformed into a generational nightmare, where wealth and prestige couldn't protect a family from darkness that seemed to follow them through every corridor, every closed door, every silent room. The year is 1876. William J. Lemp stands before this impressive property, his eyes gleaming with the confidence of a man who has conquered the impossible. He's not just any businessman, he's the owner of the Lemp Brewing Company, the 4th largest brewery in the entire United States during the golden age of German immigration. $7 million. That's what his empire is worth, a fortune so vast it's almost incomprehensible for the time. Hundreds of workers depend on him. Underground tunnels connect the mansion directly to the brewery, a subterranean network that speaks of ambition, of control, of a man who wanted everything within reach. William Lemp didn't start with this mansion. He didn't start with millions. His father, Johann Adam Lemp, arrived in America from Germany in 1838 with nothing but a recipe and a dream. Johann opened a small grocery store in St. Louis, but his real passion was brewing. He brought with him the knowledge of lager beer, a brewing technique virtually unknown in America at the time. While most Americans drank warm, heavy ales, Johann experimented with lager in the natural caves beneath the city, using the cool, constant temperatures to ferment his beer properly. The gamble paid off. His lager became incredibly popular. By the time William took over the business in 1862, after his father's death, the Lemp Brewery was already growing. But William was different from his father. Johann was a craftsman. William was an empire builder. He expanded aggressively, invested in new technology, built a massive brewing complex that dominated the St. Louis skyline. He acquired the mansion not just as a home, but as a statement. This was a palace for beer royalty. The mansion itself was extraordinary. Italian marble graced the entrance halls. African mahogany panels lined the walls. Crystal chandeliers hung from painted ceilings. There was an indoor swimming pool, rare for the era, a theater room for private performances, art galleries filled with European paintings. The Lemps hosted lavish parties where St. Louis high society gathered, where champagne flowed, where orchestras played, where everyone wanted an invitation. But mansions have a way of keeping secrets. Behind the ornate doors and beneath the polished floors, the Lemp family was hiding something that society would never accept. William and his wife Julia had a son, their youngest child, who was born with Down syndrome. In the late 19th century, disabilities were seen as shameful, something to be hidden away. Families like the Lemps, who prided themselves on their standing in society, couldn't bear the thought of anyone knowing. So they kept him hidden. His name is lost to most historical records, this child who lived within the walls of luxury but never truly belonged to the world outside. He was kept in certain rooms, away from guests, away from the public eye. Staff were instructed never to speak of him. It's one of the cruelest aspects of the Lemp story, this unnamed son who represented everything the family thought would damage their reputation. While his siblings enjoyed the privileges of wealth and social status, he lived in isolation, a secret that weighed on the family like a curse. By 1900, the Lemp Brewery was at its peak. William J. Lemp was one of the wealthiest men in St. Louis. His children were grown, positioned to continue the dynasty. His eldest son, William J. Lemp Jr., known as Billy, was being groomed to take over the business. His daughter Elsa was married into another prominent St. Louis family. Everything seemed perfect from the outside. But on February 13th, 1904, Frederick Lemp died suddenly. Frederick was William's 4th son and his favorite child. He was only 28 years old. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, though some accounts suggest complications from an illness. For William Sr., then 68 years old, the loss was devastating. Frederick wasn't just a son. He represented the future, the continuation of everything William had built. 3 weeks later, on February 7th, 1904, William J. Lemp Sr. walked into his bedroom on the 2nd floor of the mansion. He closed the door behind him. Staff members heard a single gunshot. When they found him, William was dead, a revolver in his hand. He had shot himself in the head. No suicide note was found. The man who had built an empire, who had everything society said mattered, chose to end his life in that bedroom overlooking the grounds he'd worked so hard to acquire. The family tried to keep the details quiet, but news spread quickly. Suicide was scandalous, especially among the upper class. The Lemp family's perfect facade had cracked, and St. Louis society whispered about what could drive such a successful man to such a desperate act. Was it grief over Frederick's death? Was it something else? Some hidden burden only William knew? Billy Lemp, now 29 years old, inherited everything. The brewery, the mansion, the fortune, and the pressure. Billy was a complex man, charming and social, but also known for his temper and his drinking. He took over the business during a difficult time. Competition in the brewing industry was fierce. Labor disputes were becoming more common. But Billy kept the Lemp brewery running, maintained the family's position in St. Louis society, and tried to move forward from his father's tragic death. Billy married Lillian Hanlon, known as the Lavender Lady, because of her love for the color lavender. She redecorated much of the mansion, filling it with lavender draperies, lavender carpets, lavender everything. They seemed happy at first, hosting parties that rivaled the grandest events of William Sr.'s time. But the marriage was troubled. Billy's drinking worsened. There were arguments, separations, reconciliations. In 1908, they divorced, scandalous enough at the time, but the divorce proceedings were particularly bitter, with accusations and counter-accusations that provided fodder for St. Louis gossips. Then came 1920, the 18th Amendment, Prohibition. The manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages was now illegal in the United States. For the Lemp Brewery, it was a death sentence. Overnight, their entire business model became criminal. Some breweries tried to survive by making near beer, a low-alcohol beverage that was legal. Others pivoted to producing soft drinks or other products. Billy tried, but his heart wasn't in it. The writing was on the wall. In 1922, Billy made the devastating decision to close the Lemp Brewery permanently. The massive complex that had employed hundreds of workers, that had been the heart of the family's wealth and identity, was shut down. Equipment was sold off. Workers were let go. The empire that Johann Adam Lemp had started nearly a century before, that William J. Lemp had built into one of America's greatest breweries, was dead. But the financial blow was nothing compared to what happened next. The Lemp Brewery and its assets were auctioned off. The final sale price was $588,000. Let that sink in. An empire once valued at $7 million sold for less than $600,000. It was humiliating. It was a public acknowledgement of total failure. Billy Lemp watched everything his father had built disappear for a fraction of its worth. Billy tried to move on. He remarried, this time to a woman named Ellie Limburg. They lived in the mansion, rattling around in those 33 rooms that once hosted hundreds of guests and now felt empty, haunted by memories of better times. Billy's drinking continued. His mood darkened. Staff members later reported that he would spend hours alone in his father's old office, staring at the walls, lost in thoughts no one else could penetrate. December 29, 1922, just months after the brewery was sold. Billy Lemp walked into his office in the mansion, the same office where his father had managed the empire. He sat at the desk. He picked up a revolver. Like his father before him, Billy Lemp shot himself in the head. He was 44 years old. When staff found him, there was no note, no explanation, just the second Lemp suicide in the same house, separated by 18 years but connected by the same desperate finality. The pattern was now undeniable. The Lemp family was cursed. That's what people said. Something was wrong with that mansion, with that family, with everything the Lemps touched. 2 suicides, both by gunshot, both in the mansion, both men who had seemingly everything to live for by external measures. The psychological weight of that realization began to settle on the remaining family members. Charles Lemp, Billy's younger brother, now inherited what remained of the family fortune. Charles was different from his father and brother. He was more withdrawn, more cautious, perhaps more aware of the darkness that seemed to follow the Lemp name. He didn't live in the mansion full-time, preferring other properties, but he couldn't escape the family legacy. Charles spent his later years largely alone, living in a farmhouse he owned outside the city. He never married. Friends and family described him as increasingly reclusive, haunted by the deaths of his father and brother, perhaps wondering if he would be next. He suffered from various health problems, and by the late 1940s, he was in poor health and poor spirits. On May 10th, 1949, Charles Lemp, then 77 years old, shot himself in the basement of his farmhouse. The third Lemp suicide. The pattern had repeated across 4 decades, spanning from the original mansion to a different location, but always the same method, always the same finality. Charles left behind a small estate, and with his death, the main Lemp family line effectively ended. But the story wasn't over. Back at the mansion, Elsa Lemp, William Sr.'s daughter, had inherited the property after Billy's death. Elsa had married twice, but both marriages ended in divorce. She lived alone in the massive mansion, with only a few staff members for company. Neighbors rarely saw her. She became known as the Lavender Lady after Lillian left, maintaining her sister-in-law's decorating choices, living among the ghosts of her family's past. Elsa was the keeper of secrets. She knew everything. She had watched her father spiral into depression after Frederick's death. She had found her brother after his suicide. She had lived through the downfall of the brewery and the public humiliation of seeing the family empire sold for pennies on the dollar. And she carried another burden, the knowledge of her hidden brother, the son with Down syndrome who had been kept secret all those years. March 20th, 1949, just 2 months before Charles's death. Elsa Lemp Wright, at age 66, was found dead in her bed in the mansion. She had shot herself in the chest. the fourth Lemp family suicide. Unlike the others, there was some speculation about the circumstances. Some claimed she had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and chose to end her life on her own terms. Others suggested the isolation, the weight of family tragedies, and the loneliness of living in a mansion built for joy but filled with death had simply become too much. 4 suicides across 4 decades. Father, son, daughter, all in the shadow of that mansion, all connected to the rise and catastrophic fall of the Lemp brewing empire. The American dream had become an American nightmare, and the Lemp family name, once synonymous with success and wealth, was now forever associated with tragedy. The mansion itself stood empty after Elsa's death. No one wanted to buy it. Who would want to live in a house where 4 people had taken their own lives? Where secret rooms had hidden shameful secrets, where every corner seemed to hold the weight of decades of pain. The property fell into disrepair. Windows broke, paint peeled, the gardens became overgrown, the underground tunnels that once connected to the brewery flooded and were sealed off. The mansion that had been a symbol of triumph became a symbol of decay. For years, the Lemp mansion was a curiosity, a dark tourist attraction that locals would drive past and point out, telling stories of the cursed family and their tragic ends. Urban explorers sometimes broke in, searching for ghosts or just for the thrill of being in a place so filled with history and horror. The city of St. Louis debated what to do with it. Some suggested tearing it down, erasing the painful memory. Others argued for preservation, recognizing its historical significance beyond the tragedies. In 1975, 2 entrepreneurs named Dick Pointer and Paul Pointer purchased the mansion with a unique vision. They would restore it and convert it into a restaurant, an inn, embracing the property's dark history rather than running from it. The renovation was extensive. They uncovered original features that had been hidden or damaged over the years. The Italian marble was cleaned. The mahogany was restored. The building was brought back to something resembling its original grandeur. But as workers renovated, strange things began to happen. Tools would disappear and reappear in different locations. Workers heard footsteps in empty rooms. Doors would close on their own. The basement, always the darkest and coldest part of the mansion, seemed particularly active. Several workers refused to go down there alone, reporting feelings of being watched, of overwhelming sadness, of a presence that wanted them to leave. When the Lemp Mansion restaurant and inn opened, these stories became part of the attraction. The Pointers didn't hide the history, they embraced it. Each room was decorated in period style, and guests were told about the family who had lived there. The restaurant featured a menu with items named after the Lemp family members. The mansion quickly gained a reputation as one of the most haunted locations in America, and the paranormal reports kept coming. Guests staying overnight in the inn reported seeing figures in period clothing walking the hallways, disappearing when approached. The most commonly reported ghost is a man in a suit, believed to be William J. Lemp Sr., seen in the hallway near where his bedroom was located. He appears solid, walking purposefully, then simply vanishes. The lavender suite, once Lillian's favorite room, is particularly active. Guests report the strong smell of lavender even though no lavender is present in the room. Some have reported feeling someone sit on the edge of their bed at night, only to turn on the lights and find no one there. Others have heard a woman humming or singing softly, a sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The basement, accessible only on guided tours, is where most people report feeling truly frightened. The temperature is always noticeably colder than the rest of the mansion, even in summer. Visitors report feeling pushes, touches, and overwhelming sensations of sadness and despair. Some have reported seeing a figure of a boy in the basement, believed to be the hidden son with Down syndrome, the family member whose name was lost, but whose presence seems to linger. Billy Lemp's office, where he died, is now part of the restaurant. Diners sitting in that area have reported glasses moving on their own, silverware being rearranged when they're not looking, and the feeling of someone standing behind their chair. Some have reported seeing a man's reflection in the windows, a face that wasn't there when they turned around. The mansion has been investigated by numerous paranormal research teams over the years. EVP recordings have captured voices saying things like, "Go away, help me," and names that sound like William or Elsa. Photographs taken in the mansion often show unexplained orbs, shadows, and occasionally what appear to be human figures in mirrors or windows that weren't visible to the naked eye. Electromagnetic field meters spike in certain rooms for no apparent technical reason. One particularly chilling piece of audio evidence was captured in the area that used to be the hidden son's room. Investigators reported recording what sounds like a child crying, and a woman's voice saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Whether real or imagined, whether genuinely paranormal or the product of overactive imaginations, these reports continue to this day. But beyond the ghost stories and the paranormal investigations, the Lemp Mansion represents something deeper about the American experience. Here was a family that achieved everything society told them to want: wealth, status, a magnificent home, a business empire, social standing. They lived in a literal palace. They had everything. And yet, 4 members of that family chose death over continuing to live with what they had. What does that tell us? The tragedy of the Lemps isn't just about suicide or ghosts or a cursed family. It's about the emptiness that can exist behind a perfect exterior. It's about the pressure that comes with success, the expectations that can crush a person, the way families can hide pain behind closed doors and perfect manners. William J. Lemp Sr. watched his favorite son die and couldn't bear to continue. Did he feel he had failed as a father? Did Frederick's death expose the fragility of everything William had built, the realization that no amount of money could protect the people he loved? We'll never know his thoughts in those final moments, but we know he felt his only option was to end his life. Billy Lemp watched an empire built over 3 generations, destroyed by a constitutional amendment, and sold for a fraction of its value. His identity was tied to the brewery, to being the heir to a dynasty. When that was taken away, what was left? A big empty house, failed marriages, and the ghost of a father who had also chosen death. The psychological weight must have been immense. Charles Lemp lived as the last man standing, watching his father and brother die by their own hands, living with the knowledge that the family name was now associated with tragedy rather than triumph. The isolation, the awareness that he might be next, the health problems, and the loneliness all combined into an unbearable burden. Elsa Lemp lived longest, carried the most secrets, and ultimately couldn't or wouldn't continue. Whether it was illness, depression, or simply exhaustion from carrying the weight of family tragedy, she made the same choice her father and brothers had made. The pattern was complete. The curse, whether real or psychological, had claimed 4 lives. And then there's the unnamed son, the family member hidden away, whose existence was seen as shameful enough to hide from the world. His story is perhaps the saddest of all. He never had a choice. He never had a chance at the life his siblings enjoyed. He was a secret, a burden, a reminder that the Lemp family wasn't as perfect as they wanted society to believe. If the mansion is truly haunted, if there are spirits that remain, perhaps his is the most restless, the one most deserving of acknowledgement and peace. The Lemp Brewing Company itself is gone. The massive complex where hundreds of workers produced beer that was shipped across the country has been partially demolished, partially repurposed. Some of the original buildings still stand, converted into other uses, but the brewery that made the Lemp name famous is just a memory. The underground tunnels that once connected the mansion to the brewery are flooded, sealed off, inaccessible. They represent the literal underground connections of the Lemp Empire, now drowned and forgotten. Today, visitors to the Lemp Mansion can dine in the same rooms where the family hosted their lavish parties. They can stay overnight in bedrooms where Lemp family members slept. They can walk the same hallways where William and Billy took their last steps before ending their lives. The mansion has been preserved, restored, and transformed into a business that profits from its dark history. Some might find this ghoulish, this commercialization of tragedy and death. Others might argue that it's a form of remembrance, a way to keep the story alive and learn from it. The Lemp Mansion doesn't hide its history. It presents it honestly, acknowledging both the grandeur and the tragedy, the success and the failure, the life and the death. The paranormal aspect, whether you believe in ghosts or not, adds another layer to the story. If places can hold memories, if strong emotions can somehow imprint themselves on physical locations, then the Lemp Mansion would be a perfect candidate. So much pain, so much loss, so many violent ends concentrated in one building over decades. Even skeptics who visit the mansion often report feeling uncomfortable, sad, or watched. The mansion has appeared on numerous paranormal television shows, including Travel Channel's Most Terrifying Places in America and Biography Channel's My Ghost Story. It's been featured in books about haunted locations and American ghost stories. The restaurant hosts special paranormal investigation dinners where guests can explore the mansion after dark with ghost hunting equipment. The Lemp Mansion has become a destination for both history enthusiasts and paranormal believers. But stripped of the ghost stories and the supernatural elements, the Lemp family's story is a cautionary tale about the cost of the American dream. Johann Adam Lemp came to America seeking opportunity. He found it, built a successful business, and passed it to his son. William J. Lemp took that business and turned it into an empire. He achieved more success than his father probably ever imagined possible. He bought a mansion, raised a family, and became one of the most prominent men in St. Louis. But that success came with pressure, expectations, and a need to maintain appearances at all costs. When tragedy struck with Frederick's death, William couldn't cope. He couldn't show weakness, couldn't admit that all his wealth and power meant nothing in the face of losing his son. So he ended his life, passing the burden to Billy. Billy tried to carry on, but Prohibition destroyed everything. The loss of the business, the humiliation of the auction, the weight of his father's death, all led him to the same tragic conclusion. The pattern repeated because the underlying issues were never addressed. The family didn't talk about pain, didn't seek help, didn't admit that they were struggling. They hid their disabled son because he didn't fit the image of perfection they wanted to project. They internalized their suffering, and that suffering festered until it found release through violence turned inward. 4 suicides in one family across 4 decades isn't random. It's a pattern of unaddressed trauma, generational pain, and the crushing weight of expectations. Mental health awareness was virtually non-existent in the early 20th century, especially among wealthy families who saw any admission of psychological struggle as weakness. If William J. Lemp had lived today, perhaps he would have sought therapy after Frederick's death. Perhaps he would have been diagnosed with major depression and received treatment. Perhaps he would have found healthier ways to cope with his grief. But he didn't live in that world. He lived in a world where successful men didn't admit to pain, where family secrets were hidden behind mansion walls, where suicide was shameful and scandalous rather than recognized as a tragic outcome of untreated mental illness. The same was true for Billy, for Charles, for Elsa. They lived in a time and a social class where asking for help was unthinkable. The Lemp Mansion stands today as a monument to that era, to that way of thinking, and to the consequences when pressure, pain, and pride combine without any outlet. It's beautiful and tragic, grand and haunted. A physical reminder that no amount of money, no mansion, no social status can protect you from the struggles of being human. Visitors who come to the mansion looking only for ghosts might miss the deeper story. Yes, there are unexplained sounds and strange sensations. Yes, people report seeing figures and feeling presences. But the real haunting is the weight of history, the knowledge of what happened in these rooms, the awareness that real people lived and died here in ways that should never have happened. The tragedy of the Lemps is that they had everything and nothing at the same time. They had wealth, but not happiness. They had a mansion, but not a home. They had success, but not peace. They had each other, but couldn't help each other. They were trapped by their own success, by the image they worked so hard to create, by the expectations they placed on themselves and each other. Johann Adam Lemp probably never imagined his American dream would end this way. When he arrived from Germany with his beer recipe and his ambition, he was looking for opportunity, for a chance to build something meaningful. He did that. The Lemp Brewing Company was a real achievement, a testament to immigrant success in America. But in achieving that success, in building that empire, the family set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately destroy them. The mansion, with its 33 rooms, its Italian marble, its African mahogany, its crystal chandeliers, was supposed to be a celebration of success. Instead, it became a cage, a place where secrets were kept, where pain was hidden, where 4 people made the decision to end their lives rather than continue living in its gilded rooms. The underground tunnels that once represented the connection between home and business, between personal life and professional success, now stand as flooded, abandoned passages leading nowhere. The story of the Lemp Mansion is not a simple ghost story. It's not just about paranormal activity or unexplained phenomena. It's about the human cost of success, the price of perfection, the danger of hiding pain behind a beautiful facade. It's about a family that achieved the American dream and found it wasn't enough to save them from themselves. The mansion endures, restored and repurposed. Its dark history now part of its attraction. People come to eat in rooms where the Lemps once hosted parties, to sleep in beds in rooms where family members once slept, to walk halls where tragedy unfolded. Some come seeking ghosts, others seeking history, but all leave with a sense of the weight of what happened here. Whether the spirits of William, Billy, Charles, and Elsa truly walk these halls is a question each visitor must answer for themselves. But their legacy is undeniable. Their story is a reminder that behind every grand mansion, every business empire, every successful family, there can be darkness that no amount of wealth or status can illuminate. The Lemp Mansion stands as testament to that truth. Its dark brick exterior still seeming to swallow light, its 33 rooms still holding secrets, still echoing with the footsteps of a family that had everything except the one thing they truly needed: peace. The next time you pass a beautiful historic mansion, or read about a successful family, or admire someone's achievements from the outside, remember the Lemps. Remember that you never really know what's happening behind closed doors, what secrets are being kept, what pain is being hidden. The most perfect exterior can hide the darkest interior. The biggest success can mask the deepest failure. And sometimes, the most haunted places aren't haunted by ghosts, but by the consequences of choices made in desperation, pain, and isolation. The Lemp Mansion remains a beautiful, tragic monument to a family destroyed by their own success, a reminder that the American dream can become an American nightmare, and a warning that what we hide from the world can ultimately destroy us. The lights still don't quite reach its dark brick walls. The rooms still hold their secrets. And somewhere in those 33 rooms, spread across 4 floors, the story of the Lemps continues to whisper its lessons to anyone willing to listen.